person refused to sit on the back of the bus. She changed the ride for all of us. Oh, that's the power of one. Her diary found a light in the dark. A young girl's hope touched millions of hearts. Oh, that's the power of one. One grain of sand can turn the tide. One single spark can light the night. One simple dream, one gentle word, one act of love from someone can start a chain reaction. It all begins in the heart, in the power of one. While the others threw stones, he didn't judge. He moved the world with the strength of his love. Oh, that's the power of one. One grain of sand can turn the tide. One single spark can light the night. One simple dream, one gentle word, one act of love from someone can start a chain reaction. It all begins in the heart, in the power of one. Oh, all the little things we do every day, the smallest step can bring on a change. Oh, that's the power of one. 'Cause one grain of sand can turn the tide. One single spark can light the night. One simple dream, one gentle word, one act of love from someone can start a chain reaction. It all begins in the heart, and the power of one. The power of one. The power of one. It's the power of one. Oh, it's the power of one.
Good morning and welcome to another edition of our Inclusion St. Louis Speaker Series, which we are using as part of the Festival of Nations season this year. My name is Are Obenson, President and CEO of the International Institute of St. Louis. And this week, we will be talking about the big arrivals of refugees that are projected to be coming into the community, into the St. Louis area. Is it an opportunity or is it a challenge? Now, for those of you who do not know about the International Institute, our mission at the International Institute is to build a more connected and productive society to benefit immigrants, their families, and the wider society. And we do all of this with a vision to have a diverse, inclusive, and thriving community here in St. Louis. And this Inclusion St. Louis Speaker Series is our way to engage with the audience, to have a conversation with the audience about why we do what we do, why the mission of the International Institute and so many other organizations in this community that work to serve the immigrant population is so relevant and important for our common future as a community. We are on a 6th edition of Inclusion St. Louis Speaker Series, and we're thrilled to have with us our guest speakers for today. And I would begin by introducing. I'll first begin by introducing our first panelist for today, who is the Director of Civic Engagement at the Jewish Community Relations Council. Join me in welcoming Alyssa Banford. Alyssa, it's a pleasure to have you here. We're also lucky to have with us today the Executive Director of the Marillac Mission Fund. Claire, it's a pleasure to have you here. Welcome, Claire Hundelt. We are also joined today by the Associate Director of Joe SLU. He is the co-director of Public and Social Policy at the St. Louis University. Join me in welcoming Onesimo Sándoval. Thank you for joining us today. And we have very, 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 very honored to have with us today one of the people that we have served at the International Institute, who is an immigrant from Afghanistan, who is going to be joining us and sharing a little bit of her immigrant story. Well, let's welcome Anahita Danishyar. So I don't see Anahita's video on. I don't know whether we can prompt her for her to come on so we can begin the conversation with her, because she's our guest speaker for today. So we have a great panel here, but we wanted to start today because we're talking about refugees coming into the St. Louis area. And sometimes when we talk about refugees or immigrants, we speak about them in terms of the label that's carried with that. But behind that label is the face of humans, they are people. And so we thought that it would make sense for us to put a face to this conversation and have Anahita, that I've heard so many things about her, but I'll let her introduce herself to our audience and just tell her story, because this is the story of what we do every day in St. Louis, where people come to St. Louis, and she would tell her story. So Anita, can you introduce yourself, and let's just learn a little bit more about you.
My name is Anahita Danishyar. I'm from Afghanistan. I came from Afghanistan to United States on October 2015, and I came with SIV visa.
So the SIV visa is the special immigrant visas that, yeah.
Yes, yeah, because I work with the U.S. Army and Afghanistan.
So you worked with the U.S. military in Afghanistan, and so as a result of that, you were granted the special immigrant visa to come to the United States.
Yes, is that correct? Yes.
And you choose to come to St. Louis?
Yes, I came to St. Louis, and it is 6 years that I live here, and I really like it St. Louis. It's a good city, big city, and no more traffic, and the rent is good, price. And also here is a lot of Muslim people too, the refugee people. I have a lot of friends in other countries. And also in the International Institute, people, they work with the refugees, really nice people. They always help a refugee about everything, to find the job and about the everything if the refugee need it.
So earlier when we spoke, you when you first arrived to the United States, you didn't come to see, it wasn't St. Louis, right?
Yes, it was in St. Louis.
So, but what made you then come to St. Louis?
My sister lived here. She was refugee too, but like 20 years ago.
Oh, okay.
She came here and lived in 20 or 22 years here. She really loves St. Louis, like a real American. When I decided to start my case with about the SIV visa, she told me, if you come here, you be. And I decided to come in St. Louis, and I will stay here for all. Even my son is 10 years old, moved for St. Louis. He said, "No, Mom, I really like St. Louis. I want to stay here for all."
Oh, this is great. Well, so is there anything else that you would like us to know about the friends you've made in St. Louis? Anything else?
Yeah, I have a lot of friends here. Yes.
And are your friends only from Afghanistan, or you have friends?
No, I am from the other countries. Especially, I have a friend, a Black people. He is really nice, really nice. I'm really happy with them. And also when I came United here, I didn't talk English. After I made friends, I can English, but it's not perfect, but I'm good.
Oh, this is great. And first, we're very, very grateful that you took time to share your story with us. This is why we do what we do. We're very, very happy to hear that you chose St. Louis. You love to live in St. Louis. You feel at home in St. Louis. You feel included in St. Louis. So this is
I had a trip in 2 weeks ago in Las Vegas, just for vacation. When I came to arrive to St. Louis, we feel like it is my home. It is my really a home. We are really happy here.
This is great. Well, thank you so much, Anahita, for sharing your story with us. I'm going to turn now to our panelists, and based on this Anahita's story, I'm going to ask the traditional question that I ask everybody at the start of this show: is an inclusive, based on that, is an inclusive St. Louis possible?
Yeah, about the tradition,
Yes. So, and let me begin with Alyssa to that question.
About the tradition?
No. This will be for Alyssa. This is a question for Alyssa and Anahita.
Okay. That's good. Yeah.
Thank you.
Anahita, thank you so much for sharing your story.
Thank you for you too.
Thank you. And
thank you
thank
to
you
that
so
invite
much.
me for this festival. I'm really happy to talk to you and join in this group.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Anahita.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Array. It's wonderful to be here this morning, and it's wonderful to be here with the other panelists. First I'll say, yes, I do think that an inclusive St. Louis is possible. I think that with the work of top tier institutions like the International Institute, Nahid Chapman, Mosaic, Casa de Salud, St. Francis, and so more, I absolutely believe it's possible. I do also think that the city has a ways to go, especially in regards to racial inequity. So I think that some of the barriers that stand in the way include the NAACP travel advisory, for example. I think most recently what we saw with Dr. Faisal Khan and how he was treated with the St. Louis County Council meeting and how that news was picked up, not just locally, but also nationally. And then finally, I think that divided resources between city and county also create a barrier, and it makes it difficult to create a truly thriving environment. But I think that we're making headway, and I think that with incredible programs such as the Festival of Nations, which really helps to break down barriers, and it introduces people to perhaps cultures that they've never experienced before, foods they've never experienced, people they've never met before. All of that gives me incredible hope.
Thank you very much, Alyssa. I'll tend to Claire with the same question. Is an inclusive St. Louis possible?
I think so. I'd like to think so. But I first have to step back and sort of just think, what do I mean by inclusive? And, I don't have the perfect definition, but to me, an inclusive community is one where people from different cultural backgrounds and life experiences can connect and can communicate and engage. I think the whole idea of inclusiveness for our community has to come from relationships, and that the trust enough to be able to have a conversation around the differences we bring forward. I think center to everything is respect for the human dignity of a person. And I think an inclusive community, if we're going to be one, I think we are in many places. It has to be able to have a space that's equitable for everybody, not just a few. I also think that sometimes we think tolerant. If we are tolerant, we are an inclusive community. And I think that's tricky. I don't think tolerant really means that we're achieving inclusiveness. We can't grow as our community if someone else is left out, exploited, prevented from living to their full self. To our foundation, I would say, we realize that we can't possibly know all what's involved and what's inclusive or not inclusive. So we have to ask, and we do. We spend a great deal of time, my team and I, we ask, what is it like for you? Where are the obstacles? So in language, we look at language, we think, well, should the bus pass be in Spanish? Has anyone thought about that yet? Maybe it is. So it all starts with the fact that we're dignity, and even when we look at how we can be an inclusive community, we have to be careful about what we say as much as what we don't say. How do we approach persons that are from a different community? So yes, I believe it's possible. I think we have some work to do, and it starts right here with us.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. That's very interesting perspective. I know that I think on August 16th, one of the topics we're going to be talking about is how do we speak to each other in a way that is inclusive? And I'm looking forward to that because I want to learn a lot in that area so that I know how I hope I'll be able to learn and improve the way I communicate. But that's really a very important aspect of, it's quite interesting that you brought that up. And I'll turn now to Dr. Sándoval. to that question, I know you've been working a lot on statistics and studying movements within the population, but is an inclusive St. Louis possible based on what you are seeing?
Absolutely. I think I think we always want to be hopeful that we can be an inclusive city, region. Demographically speaking, St. Louis has become more inclusive. If you look at the last data that's available compared to 1980, right? And we were historically a very fragmented city, lots of racial segregation. But we've seen over the past 30 years, especially over the past 10, 15 years, that not only is the city, but the suburbs are starting to become more racially integrated. And and St. Louis is not unique, but one of the elements that contributes to geographical integration is the role of immigrants. And we've seen this in Chicago, we see it in Detroit, Cleveland, the role that immigrants play when they come into a city, they kind of break down these geographical divides. And so we're also seeing that here in the St. Louis metropolitan region. We have a study that's going to be coming out in the fall, and it's looking at the most racially, the most diverse cities in the region based on country of birth. And we've been tracking this over time. And the St. Louis metropolitan region is in the top tier of cities that has the most racially diverse immigrants in terms of birth country. And what we've seen is that it's actually becoming more racially, more diverse based on the country of birth. And so we see that immigrants from around the world are making St. Louis their home. Even though we have a small population, we're getting a diversity of immigrants coming from around the world to make St. Louis their home. And part of that trickles down to neighborhoods, it trickles down to the municipality levels. And so we have some very, very diverse cities within our region because of the immigrant populations that are coming there. We look at Maryland Heights, we can start to look at Chesterfield, even Town and Country is becoming more racially diverse because of the immigrants who are making Town and Country their home. Town and Country is now an immigrant destination because immigrants are going there. And so by default, Town and Country is becoming more racially diverse. And so I would say, yeah, demographically speaking, there is hope. And as immigrants start to make St. Louis their home, we're going to see that trickle down into different areas of the region.
Yeah, that's a very, it's good to look at this from looking at statistics and facts and trends it really tells us that we can be hopeful that we're moving towards that more inclusive society. But let me turn back to Claire, and Claire, I want to, the Marillac Mission Foundation has been your work is centered around welcoming the stranger, right? Mm-hmm. And I want to, after listening to Anahita, for example, and can you talk a little bit about how and why the work that you do is important for this community?
Well, the Marillac Mission Fund has been around 25 years, and we are a program of ascension based in St. Louis. We are a Catholic health system. Our foundation is unique. We just focus on the St. Louis bi-state area, but our legacy is from St. Louise de Marillac and St. Vincent de Paul, who dedicated their whole life to the care of persons experiencing poverty. So, but the stranger, that's our scripture and our Catholic social teachings that urges us to welcome the stranger. It tells us that what we do, when we do, we open the doors to God. And that in the faces of others, we see the face of Christ himself. The focus is not just on, it's not and should not be just on migrants. It's really about us. And we live in a time when some approach newcomers with, hesitation and question, maybe some fear. But it's the wrong focus. It should be more on us, not on on the person, the migrant. We should look at how we open our hearts or so. Will that to us is, do we worry too much that immigrants, refugees will hurt our economy, help our economy, affect the local culture. I think we just don't ever pay enough attention on how, as Christians, we are called to respond to this duty to welcome the stranger. And Christ's call is unchanging. We are obligated to welcome the stranger. It's whatever you do for the least of my brothers, you do to me. And it's an attitude of openness, and welcoming to the stranger signifies Christ himself. It's really fundamental. And while the word of God is clear about what our choice should be, translating that really important principle, moral principle, into policy is where it gets real tricky. It's not easy, but we are committed to our faith, and it drives our work into the stranger because they are the face of God.
Well, thank you. That's a very deep meaning of the welcoming a stranger, because on the surface, I wouldn't have thought about it as this deep. It almost becomes our responsibility, right, to welcome the stranger. It is our responsibility to welcome the stranger, and that explains why we are compelled to do the work that we do. I'm going to turn to Alyssa and ask about your organization and the work that it does and how it fits within the context of this conversation of inclusion and welcoming refugees to the St. Louis community.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think a lot of what Claire touched on is we hold so many similar values in the Jewish community. And so it just warms it really, I feel so warm right now, having heard such beautiful words from you, Claire. I think it's just wonderful how much we have in common on that front. So the Jewish Community Relations Council works on behalf of the Jewish community on social justice advocacy and interfaith issues. And we convene the community to create official policy and stances on behalf of the Jewish community in St. Louis. So we listen to what's important to the community. And although we work on many issues, our main focus areas are racial equity and immigration. And when we look at Jewish history, we'd be hard-pressed not to find stories of immigration. It's an unfortunate theme of our people born out of oppression, something that has been experienced for thousands and thousands of years. And I know I grew up hearing stories of how my family was forced out of Russia, now Ukraine, because of the pogroms, and how they went from country to country trying to find their home, and eventually landed here in St. Louis. And I actually grew up in an apartment. Once I went out on my own, I had an apartment that was 2 blocks away from where my family settled when they came to St. Louis, and it just felt so connected to me. And so our community carries what it feels like, even if it is indirectly, and maybe through intergenerational trauma, but we carry what it feels like to flee for safety. And we believe that everyone deserves safety, opportunity, a home. And so we work on immigration reform because it's what's right to do. Because we know so many of us would not be here today if our mothers, grandmothers, great-grandmothers hadn't made that lonely, hard journey to find a new home. And so we work based on our values, and we work based on our experiences, because it's right.
Thank you, Alyssa. I begin to see that there's a lot of engagement in the audience with questions. And so I want to ask the audience to, please use the Q&A section for the questions, because they may, in the chat room, the questions may get lost with with many conversations going in. But if you drop it in the Q&A section, we can actually keep track of that. And I'm going to turn now to Ness, because we have a question, which I think it's a follow-up to your opening, which says that, does diversity portend inclusivity? Are there studies about this issue unique to St. Louis? So basically, when you opened up, you spoke about the fact that this community was becoming more and more diverse as a result of immigrants settling. And there's a follow-up question to say, does that mean we're becoming more inclusive?
There are two parts, and I guess I'll show my bias here. So you need, I would argue, you need quantitative diversity before you get to social integration. I would say you have to have that type of integration that's taking place. But when you look at the literature in my field, quantitative integration is different than social integration. And so you could have very diverse groups of people living in the same neighborhood, but they may not be engaging with each other, for example. But if your neighborhood is just one racial group, you're probably not going to engage with anybody within your neighborhood other than your one racial group. So you need exposure to other people as a prerequisite to get to that social integration. And so there are studies that show that this is happening. And probably the city that's shown this the most is Chicago, where the immigrants are coming in and they're breaking these very hard lines of racial segregation that exist between whites and blacks. And it's the immigrants that are coming in that are providing social interaction that's helping for some social integration to happen. St. Louis has a long way to go. St. Louis was one of the most segregated cities in the United States in 1980. It's still in the top tier of cities that's racially segregated. So it, by no means is it around the corner, but it's happening. And so I think if you are able to go around to the region, you do see these spaces of opportunity emerge where people are getting to know each other and have these conversations. And I happen to see this in school districts. And so I'm familiar with the Parkway School District, where I do see intentionality there, because it's probably one of the most racially diverse school districts, not in the region, but I would put that school district, I would put it in a sample of school districts that you would find in Houston, Chicago, Los Angeles, because what's happening in that school district is pretty amazing. And there's intentionality to get not only the children, but the parents to interact with each other and get to know each other. And that's, for me, that's a very impressive sign, because there's intentionality there that's happening in that school district, because they recognize something unique is happening there. And so it's not just about quantity, yeah, we're racially diverse, but what are we going to do with intentionality to get the students and the parents to interact with each other?
Well, thank you very much, Ness. I hope that we responded to that question. But Claire, I want to go a little bit further in talking about the work of the Marillac Mission Fund, that I must say, for full disclosure, it's a big supporter of the work that we do at the International Institute, and I want to thank you for that. But why? I know you spoke about welcoming the stranger, but in this areas of focus, one of the areas that you have been focusing is immigrants and refugees, and I want to ask, why is that important, not just for the Marillac Mission Fund, but for St. Louis and say the greater St. Louis region? We may have to unmute. We may have to unmute you. Yes.
Thank you. Back to the whole Catholic social teachings, puts our focus on this. We also support other focus areas, which include human trafficking prevention, veterans with an emphasis towards post 9/11, and older adults living independently. But we all are focused on this particular the immigrant refugee communities. Since 2011, we have funded nearly $5 million in about 164 grants to 53 unique organizations advocating, supporting, and really empowering immigrants and refugees communities. We have seen the work and the partnership with organizations that just are so hopeful and so positive. We, our grant partnerships have strengthened the capacity of these organizations and the initiatives, which I'll touch on, to really increase their reach and to improve the service delivery. And as a result, we hope that it creates a more inclusive and welcoming community in our region. I think essentially we see ourselves as part of the fuel in the immigrant refugee service engine, if I could make some kind of comparison. Our theory of change sort of expresses our approach to the work, and we believe in the intrinsic value and dignity of persons who are vulnerable or experiencing poverty. But through organizations like yours and your unique ability to care for and engage and empower people to be active on their own behalf, the nonprofit organizations are really the turnkey for us. And we value those relationships immensely. So they are, in our thoughts, that organizations are really catalysts for social change and empowerment. So we focus our dollars in trying to build relationships from that premise. And I think that's sort of important. We also, I would say, of the work we do, we see our work as part of the, when an organization can empower others, then we know we've done our job. So that's sort of the short of it. I mean, I have a couple of examples I'd like to share with you, but I can get into that later if you want.
Okay. Yes. Please go ahead. Let's listen to those.
Okay. Well, I would say definitely our work with the Immigrant Family Emergency Response Fund was really a game changer. And this is a community, our immigrants and refugees, our partnership with the organizations, the ISPN, which I need to put on the chat, Immigrant Provider Services Network. This COVID is historic. We all know that. It's changed so much. We can't ever unknow now that we've seen things. But in April, I was approached by the Immigrant Provider Services Network for me to see if I could help them to create a fund to provide emergency financial assistance to the undocumented and mixed status families and refugees in the bi-state region. They were being excluded from the stimulus funding, and they were often in, as you all know, challenging jobs that if they go to work, they risk getting sick. If they, it's difficult not to go to work. So anyway, with the Youth Bridge Community Foundation opened a new fund, and but the group, the ISBN, which is a group of 40 some odd nonprofit organizations, all volunteered, and within weeks put together a process to develop a really first ever regional structure to facilitate emergency cash assistance. A lot of organizations independently have done this, that have allowed this independently, but this was sort of a collective whole because not one organization could do it all. We're going to have to do this together. The outcome was amazing. This was occurring within weeks, really after the country was in a lockdown. Everyone was sort of dealing with their own challenges with this still, but they just were very committed. And really the bottom line is within about 10 weeks, they distributed about $400,000 to 740 families in $500 cash or check payments delivered by volunteers who met folks where they felt most comfortable. They didn't have to come into the office. And it's such a powerful story of, and there were many of the immigrant community that were in there as volunteers helping as well. Sadly, when we ran out of money, there were 1,000 families on the waiting list. The fund is still open and it's still available to support. And they have been able to go in it twice since, but it's just it was overwhelming, and it was truly remarkable to watch this process of the group that come together. And I will say that, it included the International Institute. You were one of the major leaders in the way how this was distributed. So.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's a great example, and it does answer a question which Maria was asking about how the COVID response from the immigrant community. So I'm going to turn to you, Alyssa, and I'll pick up a question from the audience, which is, this could tie to the work that you do as well as at the Jewish Community Relations Council. Is what is the, let me make sure I have that question right here. It says, what is the St. Louis region doing right when it comes to immigrant integration? And what can it do better? So I know that you've been working on this, and even in your opening you made mention of, but this would be a good opportunity for us to talk about the work that all of these organizations are doing, and how, of course, there's always room for growth, but when you listen to stories like the one that Claire just shared about the coming together of the community in time of need, it tells you that there is work being done, even though there is room for improvement.
Yeah. Well, I think St. Louis does a lot of things right when it comes to welcoming, and I think a lot of that is attributed to the International Institute and to Nahid Chapman and to a lot of the organizations that that work with new arrivals. I'd say it also comes down to a lot of the coalitions that are built, a lot of the groups that feel passionate about welcoming the stranger. And so I like to give you a story. So back in 2017, I was brand new to JCRC when my boss, Maharat Rory Pickernice, said, okay, come on, we're going to the International Institute and we're having a brainstorming session. I'll catch you up in the car. Okay, it was maybe my first day or two. And so she gave me this background of how of what the International Institute was, and how they were receiving an incredible influx of calls from Jewish community members asking what they could do as far as helping support the immigrant community. Now the Muslim ban had just been put in place, and so you saw, the protests at the airport that was happening. But community members were feeling like, well, what can we do to make sure that people who are here feel supported, and that we don't want them to feel excluded. So we had this, I don't know, it was hour and a half, 2 hour long brainstorming session where we thought about, okay, how can we streamline all of these volunteers into a singular program that is actually beneficial and impactful, something that really helps the International Institute. And so we actually identified a problem, and we saw that over the summer, in between summer school and fall semester, that the International Institute saw a drop-off in attendees for their English language classes. And the reason behind that was because school wasn't in session. And so families actually, for a variety of reasons, weren't able to procure childcare. And so then families were staying home with their kids instead of going to English classes. Well, we know that it's so vitally important for newcomers to get to take advantage of all the resources they possibly can, especially in those first 3 months. But I mean, even beyond that, the first year, it's so important. I mean, Armina said when she came here, she didn't know English. Or I'm sorry, not Armina, apologies.
Anahita.
Anahita, thank you. Anahita, when she first came here, she didn't know English. And then she learned English. Well, it's so important to know English when you're here, otherwise it makes life really, really difficult. So we thought, okay, well, this is something that we can work on. So we developed a camp, and it was a 4-week camp where we had roughly 50 campers sign up. And we were able to, we had about 200 volunteers join us to play games with the kids, teach kids English, do yoga with the kids. We had petting zoos, we had the bubble bus come, we played chess, and we watched the kids for a half day while the parents went and focused on their English lessons. And this was something that we were able to do for a relatively small investment that hopefully ended up being a long-term investment to not only help new arrivals, but also make them feel like we were investing in them, to make them feel welcome, to make them know that we want them to be here.
That's great.
So that's just one example of what we can do.
Yeah, one example of the many activities, the many programs that are being done within this community by several organizations. I'm going to come to you, Ness, with reference to a question that this is talking about the contributions that immigrants make to St. Louis, and it's from an anonymous attendee, and it says that, are there numbers on the that monitor the contributions that immigrants are making to the St. Louis economy? Immigrants are a human resource, thus there should be a win-win opportunity here, not a win-lose proposition. Since you are studying all of these trends, I thought that would be a question that you would want to take, but I would also open it up to everybody. And I must say that we're really having an engaged audience here. I have 7 questions lined up. We'll try to get through as many as we can.
Absolutely. So this is a great question. I would say that there are studies that show that that immigrants do make contributions to not only the city, but to the region. I think if you look historically, I think people forget that the city and the region, if you go back to 1850, it was a majority immigrant region. So the majority of the people that lived in St. Louis in 1850 were immigrants. It was one of the most important immigrant cities in the United States in 1850. So if we look at those businesses that were created, we kind of think of them today as American businesses, but they were all created by immigrants. And so I think we have to recognize that it's been happening every decade and it continues to happen today. And so they create jobs for people, they create spaces of opportunity. And so I would say that not only is the St. Louis recognizing the role that immigrants play, but every other city in the United States also recognizes the role that immigrants can play. And so St. Louis is actually in a competition with other cities to attract immigrants to their city. If you paid attention in the past month, the census reports show that 100% of the growth of the U.S. population now is racial minorities, and that's part of that is from immigrants. And so every city that wants to grow is going to rely on racial minorities or immigrants. And so you see cities being intentional, saying we want those jobs here, we want our growth here. And so they're being intentional to get immigrants who are living in St. Louis to move to their city. We have to be intentional as well. I've actually been receiving some mail from South Carolina, because South Carolina is trying to attract immigrants to their state. I don't know if St. Louis is, I don't know if Missouri is doing this, but I'm seeing others, Texas is doing this, right? Texas is being very intentional in trying to get immigrant entrepreneurs to move to their state. And so I think most people recognize that immigrants play a positive role, not only in the economy, but in the social infrastructure of their environments.
Well, thank you very much for that. That's really important for us to be thinking about the future, right? And we don't just want to keep the immigrants that are here. We want to make sure that we have a society that can continue to welcome more. As you say, we are in competition. I'm going to pick up the next question here, and I would open this up to anybody who would like to attempt it. And this is a question from Angelus Imani Riho. And it says, I would like to ask for the immigrants who are coming here from the borders and who want to make St. Louis home. But do you see that we have another challenge of limited resources, which we have, or do we have enough resources to welcome immigrants here? I'm paraphrasing the question here, is do we as a community have enough resources to be able to welcome the immigrants that are coming here, or are we challenged? And I would say anybody can take this question.
I would say yes. I think we have plenty of resources. We have a quality of life that's affordable. We have great schools. We have environmental capital, if you look at what's around the region. And so I don't think the issue is about resource. I think there are lots of great jobs that are here. We have to be intentional. I was in Nashville last week, and I was just surprised how intentional Nashville is in promoting Nashville as a place of racial diversity, of a place for immigrants to make their home. And I started to look at the demographics of Nashville, and it's completely different than St. Louis. And so I would say, if you were going to bet on the city, you would bet on Nashville. I'm just being honest here, right? If you were to look at a city 50 years in the future, Nashville has a better building block than what St. Louis has. But Nashville's being intentional with it.
Thank you. Anybody wants to add to that?
You know, I'm loving your pop-up dinners that you have at the International Institute. And I have to say that just,
thank you.
You know, the business sector, I can't speak with any expertise from that, but I came from the nonprofit sector, that the work every day that's being done by organizations like the International Institute, the MICA Project, I mean, so many of them, if you just spend a little time seeing what they're doing, and we can all just take small, inexpensive step of just getting to know people. And I have to believe that maybe that's intentional, what you saw in Nashville. Ness, I don't know, but it's I think it's very easy to do. Just understand what people are doing right now in our community. Just begin to probe a little deeper.
Yeah.
And
Alyssa, it looks like you want to add into that.
Yeah, the area that I can speak to with any sort of expertise is that the area of resource that has tremendous opportunity is volunteers. There's so many volunteers that are ready, able, and willing to help. They just need to be accessed. They need the avenue to be engaged. And so I think that there are people out there that very much care and want to be involved. So if they have the opportunity, they're there.
Yeah, and you know, this is one of the reasons why we're doing this program and trying to bring together stakeholders in the community, so people can learn more about each of these organizations and be able to engage with them. I see a question from Anne was asking about the special immigrant visas of the Afghans that are supposed to be coming to the United States. And all I can say is that we're doing our best to try to raise our hand as a community to help welcome the Afghans. The federal government is working hard now to get them. We understand that the first flights out of Afghanistan have been coordinated. So we hope that St. Louis would be receiving some of that population once they have been processed in the United States, and we would be here to welcome them. Now, there is a question from Gary Broom. Gary, thank you for being here. And the question is, this is a general question, and I don't know, Claire or Alyssa or Ness, and it's just about, he's asking to know about what further steps should the regional business community be taking to help St. Louis become a more welcoming and inclusive place? He says, terrific work has been done, but what else is needed to keep moving forward, especially as we have this wonderful Fortune 500 companies here in St. Louis?
I think I have found that our immigrants and refugees are highly talented, motivated, resilient people. If there are employment gaps, what can the business community do to make those skill sets available to either by training or access to those already who possess the skills? And how do we move that forward? What vehicles are in place? And you can't wait for someone to come to you. You have to sort of reach out. And I don't know what more they could do besides that, but at least advertise and be open to understand, and don't be frightened if a person doesn't speak in a language you completely understand. If more time, the better. And you just get over that little barrier, because most people are very motivated and bright and capable if just given a chance to work.
I'm not exactly sure how this could fit in, but I do feel a responsibility to call it out. And that is as we're seeing sort of the back and forth with COVID and needing to isolate, stay indoors. So access to technology and internet, computers, it's a huge gap. And so if a family doesn't have access to those two things, and also telephone, these are huge setbacks for them, and it means that it's just another giant roadblock towards moving forward. And so if any of the businesses in the region want to help moving forward on perhaps internet accessibility, perhaps having accessibility to computers and so on, I think that would be incredible.
It's closing the gap. Now we have just about 3 minutes left, and I want to make sure that we all get in our closing remarks, and I'll say in a minute. So with the arrival of refugees here, this would be like a closing question. I know we still have lots of questions to come through. We will be responding to those individually, but just to close here, is the arrival of refugees and immigrants to St. Louis, is that an opportunity or a challenge for the community? And those would be your closing remarks. I would begin with Ness, please.
I think it's an opportunity. That's just my, I think anytime you can bring and attract new residents to not only the city, but the region, it's an opportunity for the region to learn, to grow, and to celebrate diversity. And so I always see it as we want to attract residents from all over the United States to make St. Louis their home. So I see it as an opportunity, and I think it's an opportunity for us to have a greater appreciation of what's out there for us to enjoy in life. And so I would see it as a positive.
Thank you, Ness, and thank you for joining us. Claire?
I think it is obviously very positive. Our work with International Institute, as well as Nintendo for Africa, where there's 27 nationalities represented by that group and 25,000 Africans that are living here in this community. They are there, and it's only a simple way to work with an existing organization to put you right into the heart of where the action is. Yes, I believe it can be.
Thank you, Claire. Pleasure. Alyssa?
Well, I think it is both, but in a very positive way. I think that it's an opportunity for St. Louis to grow, expand, be more diverse. And I think it's a challenge that we need to rise to make our community stronger, to be more welcoming, to be inclusive, and to understand how we can rise to the challenge of creating racial equity in our city.
Well, Alyssa, Claire, and Ness, thank you very much for being part of this conversation. We hope that this conversation doesn't end here, that this is actually the beginning of a conversation that we're going to keep having and bringing together the resources to help this community become more inclusive. Next week, Monday, we're going to be talking about the housing challenge that we face as we have immigrants coming to our community. How do we work together to overcome the housing challenge? And so we're looking forward to having another panel discussion as well. Where I also want to introduce the grand finale of our season, our Festival of Nations season, that's going to be taking place on August 28th at 9 Mile Garden from 11 a.m. to 8 p.m. And I hope that everybody's going to be able to join us. So mark this down on your calendars, and we will see you again for another very inspirational conversation, hopefully next Monday. So thank you very much to our panelists for being here. It's really been a pleasure. I really enjoyed it, and I hope that you all did enjoy it as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.